Greetings, IB artists. This is Miss A, and today we'll be talking about the IB Art timeline, or how to plan your IB Art course. I'm letting my cat freak flag fly today. Hope you enjoy it. There's probably going to be a bit of noise because I'm in my room and I've got lots of cats and a wingless bird, so excuse the noise. Right, so I thought I'd do this video because it might be helpful to have an overview of where you're expected to be throughout the 2 years. And this may be useful to you as a student or, possibly teachers. This is an overview that I've used for my students, and it's based on a generic calendar, school calendar. So it's not going to be appropriate for every single school. I'm really basing this on a calendar which has a first term that is from roughly September to December until the winter break, and the second term from roughly January to about March, with then a break in March, April sometime, and then the third term from April till June until the summer holiday. So that's kind of roughly the outline that I'm going by. Of course, if you're in different parts of the world and if you're in different school systems, it might change slightly, but generally speaking, most schools have 3 terms. So I'm going to divide that up for you in terms of really what you're aiming for. Basically, the main kind of hoops that you need to jump throughout the course. In terms of what you need to achieve and when. And of course, this is an approximation. This is something that I've come up with. It is simply I'm sharing what I've been doing with my students in the past. First, I'm going to be talking about the IB Year 1, the first year of the IB Art course. The first kind of deadline, if you like, that I set to my students is roughly around about the 1st of October, which is right about now, but hopefully anybody in the future will have plenty of time to kind of actually implement this. And it is only the first deadline, and it is again only a suggestion. So my suggestion is that if you're going to have a theme, that by 1st of October you have danced around the topics that you have picked. I've already suggested that you have a maximum of 3 that really grab you and you think you can do well with, and then narrowing that down by around the 1st of October to just 1. Okay, so, and again, themes are not required by the IB. It is simply a suggestion from me that may help you focus your work a little bit more easily. Not required, but if you are going to pick a theme, then this would be the time where you really kind of commit to it. Commitment is important. Really, the first term should be all about honing your technical skills. So number 1, drawing. So hopefully lots of drawing has taken place, and by drawing I really do mean observational drawing. So accurate representational drawing of still lifes, and possibly if you are thinking of a theme, that theme could be reflected in the still life, and that way you have kind of a really easy way to have coherence in the work that you're presenting at the end of the 2 years. Not required, again, I keep saying this because it's important that you know this, but it may be useful for, some people or most people, whatever it is. So if your midterm break is around, let's say, mid to late October, it is possibly a really good idea, especially for teachers, to have some kind of an assessment of the work that has happened so far. One of the reasons that I'm doing this is because I know that schools at the moment are on and off again, and there may be, more chaos than usual. So even if the flow has been disrupted somehow you can possibly approach your teacher and just kind of have a chat with them about your work at this point. Why? Because you want to have some idea of how your work is measuring up to the criteria. You want to have a kind of overview of what you've been doing so far. You want to kind of really pinpoint things that you need to work on more or develop further. And it's important that you have this information before the midterm break. Why? Because during the midterm break, you will hopefully have more time to work on your projects. I would strongly suggest that, generally speaking, art students spend any long weekends or any breaks that you have working on a project. And usually it's a good time to really start a project and really get it up to a standard that you're happy with, because you can spend, let's say, between 2 and 4 hours a day working on and I get it. You have 100 other subjects and all of them are vying for your attention. But it's really important that you invest this time into your art practice, because it is something that needs to be practiced and it is something that needs to be developed to a specific standard, okay? And for that you simply need time. You need to invest the time into that. So you are on your midterm break and you have now discussed your work with your teacher and you have a pretty good idea of what you're doing during that midterm break. So I again suggest that you discuss it with your teacher, listen to their suggestions. If they say, well, you know what, your drawing needs to be really pushed to the maximum, you really need to become better at this and you need to practice more, then you know what to do. You go off and you do a little still life at home. If you've been dabbling in watercolors or oil painting or acrylic painting and your teacher's like, well, this is what you need to be really focusing on, that's what you do during your midterm break. Once you come back, again, make sure that you reach out to your teacher, show the work that you've been doing. Hopefully you would have finished something. If you haven't finished something, you probably have reached a stage where there's something substantial to show your teacher and something substantial to discuss. So this is what I recommend when you come back from any holiday and whenever you come back with any kind of substantial amount of work. If you don't do that, you may be kind of going in a direction that may not be agreed on with your teacher, and you could be wasting time. You could be kind of asked to do things so it's very important that you have this conversation. Avoiding your teacher, creating something at home, bringing it in, okay, this is finished. This dialogue between you and your teacher is very, very important. The next big deadline really is the one that is just before your winter break. Now the winter break is usually quite long. It goes into January, which is a great time again to set up a discipline where you're really working on your art project regularly. So before this winter break, I recommend that you and your teacher sit down and really come up with a plan so that you know and are very clear about what you're doing over that winter break. That's very, very important. I was very, very kind of rigid about this. I would get the students to write out a plan, a detailed plan for those 2 weeks really, and I would get them to sign it. And this was really because I was in a private school, which a lot of the IB schools are. I really didn't want students or parents coming up to me and saying, well, I really didn't know what to do. My child is confused, or the student saying, well, I wasn't really sure. So it's very important that these plans are, very, very meticulously kind of planned out. Of course, leave wiggle room because, art is art. But there should be a very kind of specific breakdown of what it is that you're supposed to be doing, okay? And the clearer this is, the less issues you'll have. In the classes that I have, I work individually with students all the time. Every lesson, I will go around and talk to each and every one and guide them individually. Any kind of whole classroom teaching that I do is mainly if I want to introduce some kind of topic, or if I want to discuss a technique or an artist that we want to view and discuss. But generally speaking, all the teaching that I do is really one-to-one. So basically, at least once a week, every single student gets to speak to me about their work. Now, there are people who are better prepared, and there are people who are not so prepared. So make sure that you're one of those people that is really, really well prepared with questions, and that you regularly check with your teacher about what you're doing. So now we'll get to term 2 of the first year in IB. Generally speaking, term 2 is from January to March. What I usually do is, once we come back from the winter break, let's say 1 or 2 weeks, depending on how prepared the students are, I will then have a major assessment. In this assessment, I really focus on the development of the skills that's happened, the progress that they're making with their themes, and connecting those themes with appropriate artists. I insist on kind of vetting the artists that the students are using. I don't leave students to choose, randomly. They choose their artists for sure, but usually based on recommendations from me. And this is because I feel that I'm a better judge, because of my background, I'm a better judge to pick artists who are established enough to fulfill any kind of critical examination based on the IB criteria, especially for the comparative study. This is just my opinion, I'm just sharing what I think is important. So this assessment that is 1 or 2 weeks after the winter break really kind of sets you up as a student for the rest of that term. You should now have a theme. You should have a couple, up to let's say 3 artists that you're really, really focusing on. And you are also have enough techniques and skills to really begin to push your work, further. And by this I mean to really examine the concepts, to practice the skills that you have learned, and to experiment. And this is really, in my opinion, the key word in year 1. The year 1 should be focused on experimentation and learning. It's not that you ever stop learning, but I think, if you don't do this in year 1, you will simply be behind, and your work will not be up to the standards that are required. So it's very, very important that you spend the first year especially really, really pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, learning skills that that are new to you, pushing the skills that you already have, and trying out new things, looking at new work, creating challenging work. And this is very, very important. Remember, as an examiner, I always look for growth, right? I want to see how the student has gone out of their way to learn things, to push themselves, to challenge themselves. If you don't do that, you will end up creating work that does not reflect much learning, does not reflect much risk-taking, and usually means that the work isn't very innovative or original. And I use that word original with a lot of caution, because what does that mean? But what I mean by that is you will be a student who has emerged out of all this experimentation and learning with a portfolio that is truly engaging, that truly reflects the depth of your engagement and depth of your commitment and depth of your growth. And if you don't do that, your artwork will fall short of that, and it will be less interesting for sure, and it will be more predictable or average. And of course, like I said, most IB students are quite ambitious, especially if you want to go to art school. This is what you need to invest in, because your portfolio is the most important thing. Okay? So usually in term 2 of year 1 in IB, you will have a midterm break around about mid-February. And again, I don't know if this applies to anybody or everybody. And again, before the midterm break, make sure that you've assessed your work or had your work assessed, or at least discussed it thoroughly with your teacher, that you have a plan for that midterm break. Try and kind of start a new project, or set yourself something challenging that you have a bit more time to dedicate to, whether it's large scale or something in a medium that you're not familiar with, etc. I don't know, right? So you decide where your time needs to go. And then again, once you come back from that break, you discuss things thoroughly with your teacher, and that sets you up for the next stretch of that term. And again, before the holiday, which is usually sometime in March, April, you have all the work looked at, discuss things with your teacher, look at your weaknesses, look at your strengths, what do you want to push further, what do you need to kind of really strengthen, and have a plan for the holidays. You can do it, I would suggest something like weekly goals would be great. If your holidays, 10 days, divide it into the first 5 days and then the second 5 days, right? It could be just working on one project. I'm not saying, I will never recommend that you focus on quantity over quality. Quality always comes first. But I think the more detailed your plan is, the less you'll be sitting around thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not really sure what to do, and just faffing around and wasting time. So do be kind of as precise as you can be with your plan, discuss it with your teacher, and then you're set for working over the break. So again, you kind of get the pattern now. You come back from that break, you discuss things with your teacher, you're all set for the rest of the term, which is term 3 now, and really you're finalizing all the work that you've done that year, and you're really focusing on the overview. It is probably now that there are themes and sub-themes emerging from your work. You're still focused on the one theme, but organically a lot of sub-themes come through, right? And now I think at the end of year 1, really, because we're going towards the summer holidays now, you're really in a place where you can see what you've done a lot more clearly. You've seen how you've tackled the themes. You've seen how you've been influenced by your studied artists. You have hopefully developed your conceptual kind of critical thinking analysis skills. And you are now in a place where you really see clearly your strengths and your weaknesses. You see the areas where you've done really, really well and you're happy with, and you see the areas that you really need to work on more, which when you come to the end of that term, really helps you decide what you need to do over the summer. Okay, and again, this should be discussed thoroughly with your teacher. This is the most important plan that you need, over the whole of this year. You need a very strong plan for the summer holiday. You need to know what you're doing. Again, I recommend a weekly kind of plan. Again, leave lots of wiggle room, because art will inspire you to discover unexpected avenues, which is absolutely fine as long as you are coming back to whatever your focus is. So very important to be quite clear on what you're doing, what you need to work on over the summer holidays. And of course, included in that is visiting galleries, whether in person or online. You need to kind of really strengthen the knowledge that you have of how art is presented, how art is looked at and discussed, because when you come back in the second year of IB, you are in a position where you really need to start thinking about your exhibition, how you will curate that, how will you present and organize your work. So it's very important that this is part of your summer plan. And if you're not sure where to go, ask your teacher to recommend you stuff. If you are traveling, always check out the galleries, the museums, etc., so that you are well informed and well educated in all things art, and this will help you in your own exhibition. For those of you who are doing the extended essay in IB Art, absolutely, this is the time to get things going. You should know what your question is by this time, by the end of term 3 in year 1. You should have absolutely discussed this with your mentor, and you are now, during the summer, starting your research and setting up any kind of contacts, people you need to interview, places you need to visit, books you need to read, etc. So specifically in term 3, a kind of an assessment or a kind of tutorial with your teacher when you come back with the work from the March, April, Easter break or whatever it is. This may be tricky because usually all exams are during that time. So if your school has set up a mock exam timetable during May, as a teacher, I would plan assessments around the student's schedule, so that whenever the student has a gap in their exam timetable, I would fit in the art exam. It's extremely important that the assessments happen at the end of the year. Of course, this is inbuilt into the system, it's nothing new. This is very important so that you know and gauge what level you're at, and this again will help you with your summer plan, because the feedback that you get is really important to your progress. And during the summer holidays, don't forget the sketching, don't forget the kind of the visual recording, making notes, visual and other notes, whether it's to record stuff that you see, or whether it's to record ideas, and make notes to yourself as you're working on your artwork. And again, this will help you when you come back in year 2, which is super hectic generally speaking, to have something that you come onto the course with. Your sketchbook again is your best friend. It will help you start the juices flowing again, and you will be inspired instead of paralyzed and freaking out. Okay?